Have you ever looked at the silence after a breakup and wondered if it really means they are over you? Have you stared at your phone, replayed old conversations, and tried to understand how someone who once cared so deeply could suddenly seem distant, calm, and unaffected? It is one of the most painful experiences a person can go through. Not just losing someone, but losing them in a way that feels emotionally unfinished. Especially when that person had avoidant tendencies, the breakup often feels confusing in a way that ordinary heartbreak does not. There are no clear answers, no emotional closure, no obvious signs of grief, just distance, silence, and the haunting question of whether they ever cared at all. But what if the silence is misleading? What if what you are seeing on the surface has very little to do with what is happening underneath? What if the person who looks cold, detached, and completely moved on is actually dealing with emotions they do not know how to face? This is where so many people misunderstand avoidant exes. They assume calmness means healing. They assume distance means indifference. They assume no contact means no feelings. But emotional avoidance rarely works that way. Sometimes the people who appear the least affected are carrying the most unresolved pain. When someone has learned to disconnect from emotions, they do not process heartbreak in obvious ways. They may not cry openly. They may not beg for another chance. They may not tell friends how broken they feel. They may even throw themselves into work, distractions, routines, or new experiences almost immediately. To the outside world, it looks like they are fine. It looks like they have already moved on. And for the person left behind, that image can feel devastating. It can make you question your worth. It can make you wonder if the relationship mattered at all. But what often looks like strength is actually avoidance. What looks like peace is often suppression. What looks like moving on can simply be emotional delay. Because some people do not heal by feeling their pain, they heal by running from it until it catches them later. And heartbreak has a way of catching everyone eventually. This is why the silence can be so misleading. An avoidant ex may not be calling, texting, or showing sadness, but that does not automatically mean they are over you. It may mean they are doing what they have always done. When emotions become overwhelming, they shut down, they detach, they create space, they convince themselves they do not need anyone. They focus on practical things because practical things feel safer than emotional truth. And yet late at night, in quiet moments, in the spaces where distractions stop working, memories begin to return. The laughter, the comfort, the presence they once took for granted, the moments when someone loved them despite their walls. Those memories do not disappear just because they act unaffected. They often grow louder in private. One of the hardest truths to understand is that avoidant people do not process breakups the way emotionally open people do. Many people feel the pain immediately. They cry, reflect, talk to friends, and move through the grief in visible ways. But avoidant people often experience the opposite timeline. At first, they may feel relief from emotional pressure, relief from expectations, relief from vulnerability, relief from the intensity of closeness that secretly overwhelmed them. This early relief can be confusing to witness. It can feel cruel. While you are grieving deeply, they seem lighter, freer, even happier. They may appear energized, social, or completely unaffected, but that stage is often temporary. It is not true healing. It is simply the nervous system relaxing because intimacy is no longer demanding emotional availability. The pain often comes later, after the distractions fade, after the novelty of freedom wears off, after no one is there to text them good night, after no one notices the small things about their day, after they realize peace and loneliness are not the same thing. That is when unresolved feelings begin to surface, not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, sometimes in waves, sometimes through random memories they cannot shake, sometimes through comparing new connections to what they lost. This delayed grief is why so many avoidant exes seem fine at first and then reach out months later. It is not always manipulation. Sometimes it is the first time they have truly felt the loss. Sometimes they only understand the value of connection when it is no longer available. Sometimes distance gives clarity that closeness never could. And this brings us to why they pull away so strongly after the breakup. Distance is not always about not caring. Often, it is about emotional survival. For someone uncomfortable with vulnerability, closeness can feel threatening even when they deeply want it. Love asks them to be seen, to depend, to communicate feelings, to tolerate conflict without fleeing. If they never learned those skills, intimacy can trigger fear instead of safety. So when the relationship ends, pulling away becomes their familiar refuge. They retreat into independence because independence feels controllable. They avoid conversations because conversations require honesty. They disappear because disappearing feels easier than facing pain they cannot name. This does not excuse hurtful behavior, but it explains why their actions often seem colder than their inner reality. Many people waiting for an avoidant ex to show obvious emotion are waiting for a language that person may never have learned to speak. Some people feel deeply but express poorly. Some regret privately but never apologize. Some miss you intensely but never reach out because vulnerability feels unbearable. Their silence is not always proof of absence. Sometimes it is proof of emotional limitation. And still, there is another side of this truth that matters just as much. Even if they are hurting, even if they are not over you, even if they think about you more than you know, none of that automatically creates change. Missing someone is not the same as healing. Regret is not the same as growth. Feeling loss is not the same as becoming capable of healthy love. That is why your pain must not become trapped in decoding their silence forever. It is natural to wonder what is happening in their heart. It is human to want confirmation that the love was real, but your healing cannot depend on whether they admit it. Your worth cannot depend on whether they come back, and your future cannot stay paused while someone else wrestles with emotions they refuse to face. Sometimes the most heartbreaking part of loving an avoidant person is knowing they may care deeply and still be unable to show up properly. They may miss you and still stay silent. They may regret everything and still do nothing. They may love in the only way they know how, and that way may still be insufficient for the kind of connection you deserve. If you are in the silence right now, wondering if they ever think of you, wondering if they moved on too easily, wondering why someone who once seemed to care can now feel like a stranger, remember this: surface behavior is not the whole story. People can hide pain behind pride, they can mask grief behind distance, they can bury longing beneath routine. But while they are dealing with what is happening inside them, your task is different. Your task is to deal with what is happening inside you, to honor the hurt, to rebuild your confidence, to stop measuring your value by their response, to understand that love which leaves you confused and emotionally starved is not the final definition of what love can be, because whether they are over you or not is only part of the story. The deeper question is whether you are ready to become free from needing the answer. And the moment that happens, everything begins to change. Because once you stop staring at their silence for answers, you begin to notice something else entirely. You begin to understand that while you were grieving openly, they may have been grieving invisibly. While you were trying to make sense of the ending, they may have been trying to outrun it. And while it looked like they had already moved on, something much quieter may have been unfolding beneath the surface. This is often the stage where memories begin to catch up with them. Not during the chaos of the breakup, not during the first weeks of distance, not while they are filling every empty hour with distractions, new routines, or emotional numbness. It usually happens later, when life becomes ordinary again, when the noise settles, when the phone is no longer full of constant stimulation, when there is finally space to feel what they spent so much effort avoiding. That is when the relationship starts replaying in their mind. Small moments first, a laugh in the kitchen, the way you noticed something was wrong before they said a word, the comfort of your presence during difficult days, the little rituals they once treated as normal but can no longer replace. These memories do not arrive as grand dramatic scenes. They come in fragments, in flashes, in quiet moments that seem random but carry weight. Many avoidant people do not realize what something meant until it is gone. While they had it, closeness may have felt overwhelming, expectations may have felt heavy, emotional intimacy may have triggered fear. But once the relationship is no longer there, they begin to see what existed beyond the pressure. They begin to see the safety they were offered, the patience they received, the loyalty they underestimated, the love they assumed would always remain available. And this realization can be deeply uncomfortable because it forces them to face two truths at once. The first is that they did care more than they admitted. The second is that their own defenses may have helped destroy something valuable. For a person who avoids painful emotions, that combination can feel unbearable. So instead of processing it directly, they often continue appearing distant on the outside. This is why someone can miss you and still look cold. Emotional shutdown is not emotional closure. It is simply the habit of disconnecting when feelings become intense. To those on the receiving end, it can feel heartless. It can feel like proof that you never mattered. But many emotionally avoidant people learned long ago that vulnerability felt unsafe, so they became skilled at hiding distress even from themselves. They may tell themselves they are fine. They may say the breakup was for the best. They may rationalize every problem in the relationship and focus only on your flaws. They may present an image of certainty, because certainty feels safer than grief. Yet underneath those stories, the emotional bond can still be very alive. This creates a painful contradiction. They may think about you often while pretending not to care. They may feel sadness while acting indifferent. They may remember your warmth while insisting they prefer being alone. And because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of these mixed emotions, they often retreat even further. To you, it looks like coldness. To them, it feels like control. But control is not the same as peace. Suppression is not the same as healing. Distance is not the same as freedom. Many people learn this only after enough time has passed that the truth can no longer be ignored. Then another struggle begins, the fear of reaching out. People often assume that if someone misses you, contacting you should be easy. But for avoidant individuals, reaching out can feel like walking directly into everything they fear. It means admitting vulnerability. It means risking rejection. It means acknowledging that the breakup did not solve their inner conflict. It means facing the possibility that you have changed, moved on, or no longer want them back. So instead of contacting you directly, they hesitate. They rehearse messages and never send them. They check your profile and tell themselves it means nothing. They imagine conversations and then disappear back into silence. They may want connection deeply, while fearing what connection requires. Pride also plays a powerful role here. Some people would rather suffer privately than admit they were wrong. They would rather wonder what could have been than apologize for what they did. They confuse emotional self-protection with dignity. They tell themselves staying silent is strength, when in reality it is fear wearing a mask. And shame can be even stronger than pride. Because somewhere inside, many avoidant exes know they hurt someone who loved them. They know they withdrew when closeness was needed. They know they may have created confusion, loneliness, and pain. That awareness can become so uncomfortable that instead of repairing it, they avoid the person who reminds them of it. This is why silence after a breakup is not always simple. Sometimes it is grief, sometimes it is fear, sometimes it is regret, mixed with paralysis. Sometimes it is a person standing outside the door of vulnerability, wanting to knock, but unable to move their hand. As time passes, another painful pattern often emerges. They begin comparing others to you. At first they may believe starting fresh will solve everything. New faces, new energy, no emotional history, no pressure. But novelty cannot replace depth. Surface chemistry cannot replace real understanding. Casual attention cannot replace the comfort of someone who truly knew them. They may meet people who are attractive, interesting, even kind, but then they notice something missing. No one laughs the same way. No one understands their silence the same way. No one knows the details of their life or the hidden parts of their personality that you learned with patience. They begin to understand that connection is not as easy to find as they once assumed. This does not mean you were perfect. It means emotional bonds leave imprints. The more genuine the connection, the harder it is to duplicate. Avoidant people sometimes discover this only after losing someone who accepted them more deeply than they realized. And when comparison turns into clarity, regret often follows. This is the stage many people never see. The delayed emotional crash. It can happen months later, sometimes longer. It often arrives when distractions lose their power and loneliness becomes honest, when achievements feel emptier than expected, when dating feels repetitive, when independence no longer feels exciting but isolating. Regret is rarely loud at first. It may begin as curiosity, wondering how you are, wondering if you are happier now, wondering whether things could have been different if they had communicated better, stayed softer, tried harder. Then curiosity becomes memory, memory becomes longing, and longing becomes the heavy realization that some losses cannot be undone easily. For many avoidant exes, this is the first time they truly feel the breakup. Not when it happened, but when the emotional debt comes due. They postponed pain, and now pain has returned with interest. Yet even here, not everyone responds maturely. Some reach out sincerely. Some attempt casual contact to test the waters. Some send vague messages because direct honesty still feels too risky. Some say nothing at all and carry the regret in silence. That is why it is so important not to romanticize delayed realization. Yes, they may miss you later. Yes, they may understand your value after losing you. Yes, they may feel the weight of what happened long after you cried your tears. But their realization does not erase what you experienced. It does not rewrite the nights you felt abandoned. It does not automatically mean they are ready to love differently. Sometimes people recognize the value of what they lost and still remain trapped in the patterns that caused the loss. Awareness alone is not transformation. Missing you is not emotional availability. Regret is not relational skill. Nostalgia is not accountability. This is where your healing becomes sacred. Because while they are learning lessons in delayed time, you have the chance to learn yours in real time. You can learn that your love was real, even if it was not fully received. You can learn that being misunderstood does not diminish your worth. You can learn that someone's inability to meet you is not evidence that you asked for too much. You can also learn to stop waiting for pain to educate someone else before you permit yourself to move forward. Too many hearts remain stuck in hope, imagining that if the other person finally regrets enough, everything will make sense. But closure does not always arrive through their return. Sometimes it arrives through your growth. Through the day you realize you no longer need their awakening to validate your experience. Because the truth is this: they may replay every memory. They may compare everyone to you. They may feel regret in the deepest private hours of their life. But your future cannot be built on what they might someday feel. It must be built on what you choose now. And when you choose yourself, something remarkable happens. Their silence loses power. Their delay loses importance. Their confusion stops defining your path. You become more interested in the life ahead than the feelings they hid behind. That is when heartbreak begins turning into wisdom. And wisdom is where real freedom starts. Because once you begin seeing clearly, you stop interpreting every small sign through the lens of hope. You stop believing that silence means strength, that distance means certainty, or that indifference means they have forgotten you. You begin to understand that some people remain emotionally connected long after they walk away. They just do not know how to carry that connection in healthy ways. This is why many avoidant exes continue watching from a distance. They may not call, they may not apologize, they may not openly ask for another chance, but they stay aware. They check quietly. They notice changes. They wonder who is in your life now. They keep tabs through social media, mutual friends, old habits, or moments of curiosity they pretend are meaningless. To the person on the receiving end, this can feel confusing. If they care, why not speak? If they miss you, why not try? If they are watching, why stay hidden? But distance allows them to feel connected without facing vulnerability. It lets them observe without risking rejection. It gives them access to your world while protecting themselves from the discomfort of honest emotional exposure. Watching from afar often becomes the compromise between longing and fear. They may want to know if you are happy. They may want reassurance that you still think of them. They may want proof that the bond mattered. Yet they may not want the emotional responsibility that real contact requires. So they remain at the edge of your life instead of stepping into it. This can create false hope if you are not careful. A view, a like, a random reappearance, a question through someone else, these things can feel like love returning. Sometimes they are signs of lingering attachment, but attachment is not the same as readiness. Interest is not the same as effort. Curiosity is not the same as commitment. And beneath all of this is a deeper battle many avoidant people live with every day. They want connection, but they fear intimacy. They want closeness, but closeness activates old defenses. They want love, but love asks for emotional presence they may never have learned to sustain. This inner conflict is exhausting. Part of them longs for warmth, partnership, and someone who truly understands them. Another part panics when those very things become real. They may chase love when it feels distant, then withdraw once it becomes available. They may miss you intensely after separation, then feel overwhelmed if reconciliation becomes possible. This is why so many relationships with avoidant people feel like emotional whiplash. You are pulled close, then pushed away, reassured, then confused, wanted, then avoided. It is not always because they are playing games. Often it is because two opposing needs are fighting inside them at the same time, the need for love and the fear of love. But understanding their conflict does not mean sacrificing yourself to it. Compassion should never require self-abandonment. You can recognize their wounds without making those wounds your home. You can empathize with their struggle without accepting a life of inconsistency. Eventually, many avoidant exes feel the pull to reconnect, but because direct emotional honesty still feels threatening, they often return in partial ways: a casual message, a random check-in, a joke tied to an old memory, a vague "how have you been" sent late at night, a breadcrumb instead of a real conversation. Breadcrumbing happens when someone wants access to your energy without offering true clarity. They want to know you are still there. They want comfort, familiarity, or ego reassurance. They want the door open without walking through it fully. Sometimes it is conscious, sometimes it is not, but the effect on you can be the same: confusion, hope, emotional setback. You may think the message means transformation. You may believe they finally understand everything. You may imagine that all the pain has led to maturity. And sometimes people do change. Sometimes distance creates real reflection. Sometimes therapy, accountability, and life experience soften defenses. But many times the first reach out is not evidence of growth. It is evidence of loneliness, nostalgia, or temporary emotional discomfort. That is why you must learn the difference between missing you and changing. Missing you means they feel your absence. Changing means they have developed the capacity to love differently. Missing you can happen in one sad evening. Changing often takes sustained effort, humility, self-awareness, and time. Missing you says, "I've been thinking about you." Changing says, "I understand how I hurt you, and I am doing the work to become healthier." Missing you sends a late-night text. Changing follows through consistently. Missing you seeks relief from loneliness. Changing seeks repair through accountability. So if they reappear, look beyond emotion. Look at patterns. Look at consistency. Look at whether they can hold difficult conversations instead of escaping them. Look at whether they can tolerate closeness without punishing you for it. Look at whether their actions create safety rather than suspense. Because love should not require decoding every signal. Love should not feel like surviving scraps of attention. Love should not leave you constantly wondering whether someone wants you today. Then something even more powerful can happen. You begin to move on. At first it may feel impossible. You may think your heart is permanently tied to the story. You may believe no one will understand you the same way. You may fear that healing means betraying the love you once felt. But slowly, almost invisibly, life starts returning. You laugh without forcing it. You sleep without checking your phone first. You go hours, then days, without replaying old conversations. You notice beauty again. You rediscover interests that had gone quiet. You remember who you were before confusion became your normal state. And often, this is the exact moment they begin to feel your absence most strongly. When you stop chasing, stop waiting, stop orbiting their silence, the emotional dynamic changes. Your energy is no longer available on demand. The safety net of your devotion disappears. The version of you that always cared, always hoped, always remained emotionally reachable begins to fade. For some avoidant exes, your healing becomes the trigger for their realization, not because they are malicious, but because certainty kept them numb. As long as they believed you would always be there in some emotional form, they did not have to face true loss. But when you genuinely detach, reality arrives. They notice you are lighter, stronger, less reactive, less available to mixed signals. They sense that the chapter may actually be closing. And sometimes that is when urgency appears. Suddenly they reach out more directly. Suddenly they express feelings they buried. Suddenly they speak of memories, mistakes, and second chances. This can be one of the most emotionally intense moments in the journey because it often comes after you fought so hard to let go. Part of you may feel validated. Part of you may feel angry. Part of you may still love them. Part of you may fear repeating the same cycle. And this is where your growth matters most, because their realization should not erase your discernment. Their longing should not cancel your memory. Their return should not automatically outrank the lessons pain taught you. Ask yourself, are they responding to losing access, or have they truly become more emotionally available? Are they reaching for comfort or building something healthier? Are they moved by loneliness or transformed by accountability? Sometimes people come back because they miss being loved, not because they learned how to love. Sometimes they want the old relationship restored without doing the inner work that the old relationship required. Sometimes they are sincere but still unprepared. And sometimes, to your surprise, you no longer need what once felt impossible to lose. That can be the greatest healing of all. Not bitterness, not revenge, not proving anything. Simply realizing that the person who once held so much emotional power over your life no longer controls your peace. Moving on does not always mean you stop caring. It means you stop abandoning yourself for the possibility of someone else's potential. It means you stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. It means you stop offering endless patience to patterns that keep wounding you. When you move on, you teach yourself something priceless. Love is not scarce. Peace is not negotiable. And your heart deserves more than delayed appreciation. That is when the story truly changes, because what once felt like rejection becomes redirection. What once felt like loss becomes clarity. What once felt like the end becomes the beginning of a version of you that no longer settles for uncertainty disguised as love. What once felt like the end becomes the beginning of a version of you that no longer settles for uncertainty disguised as love. And once you reach that place, you can finally see the breakup through a different lens, not just as pain, but as revelation, not just as loss, but as truth. Because when someone emotionally distant loses a person who truly loved them, the impact often reaches deeper than they expected. Many avoidant people spend years convincing themselves they do not need much from others. They tell themselves independence is enough. They pride themselves on self-reliance. They learn to function without asking for help, without leaning too deeply, without exposing the vulnerable parts of themselves. On the surface, it can look strong, it can even look admirable, but hidden inside that identity is often a fragile assumption that connection is optional and replaceable. Then one day, they lose someone who loved them consistently. Someone who saw beyond the walls, someone who offered patience, warmth, loyalty, and emotional steadiness, someone who cared not just for the polished version of them, but for the guarded one too. And when that person is gone, something profound can happen. The ego experiences shock, because it is one thing to believe love will always be available. It is another thing to discover that it is not. It is one thing to assume someone will keep understanding your distance forever. It is another thing to realize they have finally chosen themselves. It is one thing to treat secure love casually. It is another thing to face life without it. This is why some avoidant exes seem most affected only after you become truly unavailable. Your absence confronts them with what their defenses protected them from seeing. They may suddenly understand that emotional safety was rare, that being accepted deeply was rare, that someone loving them through inconsistency was rare, and rare things are often valued only after they are lost. For many, this becomes the most uncomfortable realization of all. The person they thought would remain is now moving forward. The comfort they took for granted has limits. The loyalty they assumed was permanent had boundaries. The love they could not fully receive has now gone somewhere else, perhaps inward toward your own healing, perhaps outward toward a healthier future. That realization can shake the ego, because it removes the illusion of endless chances. It forces accountability where avoidance once created escape routes, and sometimes that shock becomes the first crack in years of emotional armor. But not everyone responds in time. This is one of the saddest truths in relationships shaped by avoidance. Some people wake up only after the damage is done. They realize what mattered after trust is broken. They learn the language of vulnerability after the listener has gone silent. They understand commitment after the person who wanted it has stopped waiting. They may return later with sincerity in their eyes and regret in their voice. They may finally speak the truths they once buried. They may admit they were scared, overwhelmed, immature, disconnected, or unable to receive the love they were given. They may say they think about you constantly. They may confess they compared everyone to you. They may acknowledge that losing you changed them. And sometimes all of that can be true. People do grow. Pain can humble people. Loss can awaken self-awareness. Regret can become the beginning of maturity. But timing matters. There are wounds caused not only by what happened, but by when understanding arrived too late. You may have begged for communication when silence was chosen. You may have offered patience when withdrawal was repeated. You may have fought for clarity while they protected distance. By the time they awaken, you may have already rebuilt yourself from the ground up. This creates one of the most bittersweet moments a person can face. The love is still there somewhere, but the version of you that once would have accepted anything is gone. The heart may soften, yet wisdom stands beside it. You can care and still say no. You can understand their pain and still protect your peace. You can believe they changed and still recognize that your season with them has ended. Some returns are genuine reunions. Others are lessons arriving late. Knowing the difference requires honesty with yourself, not the honesty of longing, but the honesty of growth. And then there are the words many avoidant exes never say at all. The truths they carry privately, because vulnerability still feels too exposed, the apologies written only in their mind, the gratitude they never expressed, the love they felt but could not sustain. They may wish they could say that your kindness unsettled them because they were not used to being treated gently. They may wish they could say that your consistency frightened them because inconsistency felt more familiar. They may wish they could say that every time you asked for closeness, it triggered fears older than the relationship itself. They may wish they could say that they did care, even when they looked detached, that they did notice your tears, even when they turned away, that they did feel loss, even when they acted numb, that your love mattered more than they knew how to show. They may wish they could say they are sorry for making you question your worth, sorry for teaching confusion where reassurance was needed, sorry for making distance feel like something you had to earn your way through, sorry for receiving devotion with guarded hands. But many never say these things, some because pride remains stronger than courage, some because shame keeps them silent, some because they do not know how to articulate emotions even when they feel them, some because by the time they are ready, life has already moved on. And this is why your power can never depend on what they eventually confess. If those words come, let them be information. If they never come, let your healing continue anyway. You do not need a delayed apology to validate the pain you lived through. You do not need their admission to prove your love was real. You do not need their regret to justify moving forward. Your true power begins in detachment, not coldness, not bitterness, not pretending you never cared. Real detachment is different. It is the calm understanding that your peace no longer rises and falls with someone else's emotional capacity. It is the decision to stop chasing clarity from those committed to confusion. It is the willingness to release what you wanted in order to receive what you deserve. Detachment means you stop interpreting every breadcrumb as destiny. You stop reading hidden meaning into every silence. You stop placing your life on hold while waiting for someone else to become who they should have been when they had the chance. It means you return to yourself, to the hobbies neglected during heartbreak, to friendships that held you together, to the dreams paused while you obsessed over someone's mixed signals, to the self-respect that asks harder questions now, to the heart that still believes in love, but no longer mistakes inconsistency for passion. And then the final truth arrives. Your avoidant ex may not be over you. They may think of you often. They may miss you in private. They may regret losing you. They may compare others to the connection you shared. They may even love you in the limited way they knew how. But none of those truths matter more than this one. Being missed is not the same as being cherished. Being remembered is not the same as being chosen well. Being loved imperfectly is not the same as being loved healthily. Sometimes the person who cannot get over you is still the person who cannot grow enough to keep you. Sometimes their feelings are real, but their capacity remains small. Sometimes they carry your memory for years, while never developing the skills that would have made the relationship safe. That is not your burden to solve. Your role was never to heal another person by sacrificing yourself. Your role was never to shrink your needs so someone else could avoid discomfort. Your role was never to become endlessly patient with patterns that harmed you. Your role now is simpler and more beautiful, to become the person who no longer abandons themselves, to honor the love you gave by giving it to your own future, to trust that secure, mutual, emotionally available love exists beyond the confusion you survived, to let heartbreak refine you instead of define you, So yes, your avoidant ex may not be over you, but the deeper victory is that you are becoming over the version of love that kept hurting you. And when that chapter closes, a new life opens, one where peace feels familiar, love feels safe, and you no longer need someone's delayed realization to know your value.